Hi everyone, this is JP for Biker Bible, and I'm going to be doing a review of my own bike, which I've owned for 2 years, and I've loved riding. It's the Africa Twin, the 2018 version. I bought it in August in 2018. I've had it for 2 years. I've ridden it for 15,000 kilometers. I've gone across large parts of India with it. Okay, so here we go. This is a quick review of the Africa Twin. I've had it for 2 years and I've ridden it about 15,000 kilometers. So I know this bike pretty well and I'm going to tell you all about it, whether you like it or not. So let's go. This is just getting out of the lanes of Bandra. All right, to begin with, this is a bike that has a 21-inch wheel up front and 18-inch wheel at the back. That's one of the defining characteristics. So this is the 2018 Africa Twin. It's the DCT version. That's the only one that was available in India at the time. Now in 2020, they've introduced the Adventure Sports version, which has a manual version as well. It's great for going off-road, great for touring. It's a 1-liter engine. It's got 87 bhp in India because it's detuned, I think, for the fuel, if I'm not mistaken. It has a 21-inch wheel up front, so that's very important because that defines how the bike rides, and that's what makes it such a good off-roading bike. It's got an 18-inch wheel at the back, and apparently that's the combination that all dirt bikes have as well, because they need to go over obstacles and rocks and things like that. So this bike is clearly directed at performance off the road, but it's pretty good on the road as well. The suspension is fantastic. Especially if you ride in India, you're going to love it because it's got great suspension. It's got 230 mm of wheel travel at the front and about 220 mm at the back. It's got 250 mm of ground clearance, so you never need to worry about scraping speed breakers like sports bikes have to. It's a tall bike, a really big and heavy bike. It weighs about 243 kilos, and the seat height is adjustable between 820 and 840 mm. So there are 2 positions. Once you get used to the weight, it's fairly easy to handle because the weight is distributed fairly well and it balances fairly well. It's not very top heavy. And if you know all the riding techniques, you should be able to manage this bike pretty well. But for newbies or for shorter people, it takes a little bit of overcoming some apprehension about handling a big heavy bike. And the 820 mm seat height does help. If you set it at that height, your feet can touch the ground on both sides, which somehow seems to be very important for somebody who's new to big and heavy bikes, and you can get used to it. But once you get used to riding it and you know all the techniques, that bikes are all about balance, it shouldn't worry you after that. It is still a heavy bike, but once it gets moving, that doesn't matter. At parking speeds, yes, it is a bit of a handful, not while riding it, but while wheeling it around. I'm 5'11", and I set the seat at 840 mm, and actually I'm so used to the seat height now that I'd prefer something even taller. 860 would have been my preferred height for the seat, actually. The tires on this bike are tubed tires. It's an important consideration because if you get a puncture on a tube tire, taking the wheel off and repairing the puncture with the tube, etc., can be quite difficult, and your local garage mechanic may not suffice. The good thing is the 2020 Africa Twin has tubeless tires, so it's resolved that issue. The reason it has tube tires is that tube tires are supposed to be better for off-roading. You can reduce the pressure to a great degree compared to tubeless tires, and that actually helps a lot with grip when you're riding in sand or in difficult conditions off-road. There's a lot of traffic here today on the Western Express Highway heading over to the north in Mumbai. So the suspension and the tires can really handle the roads really well. You can go over some of the worst roads that you can find in India and you won't even feel a thing. Just get up on the foot pegs, shoot across that road at 60, 50, 60, 70 kilometers an hour, and you'll be sailing along while other cars and other vehicles are crawling at 20 kilometers an hour. Or even less. So that way it's a fantastic bike for India. And if you want to tour different parts of India, this would be a really practical bike to do it on, a great, enjoyable bike to do it on, because it would be very comfortable, powerful, great on the highways, but absolutely supreme on terrible roads. So like I said, the 2018 version of the bike only came in DCT, and DCT essentially means dual clutch transmission, which means automatic gears. In automatic gears, you have two choices. You can put on one of the many modes that the bike has and allow the bike to change gears for you automatically depending on the situation. Or you can put it in manual mode and change the gears via a very Tiptronic kind of system with two levers that are on the handlebar on the left side, along with the indicators and the horn. And it's actually very intuitive, it's very easy, and that's what I end up mostly using. The reason is that you feel in control of the gear changing entirely. I must say some of the modes in terms of automatic gears where you let the bike make the decision for you is also perfectly good. Depending on the condition, if I'm cruising on a highway or if I'm just strolling through the city, I can choose a mode that's to my liking. The modes vary between different degrees of sportiness and aggressiveness of riding, but very often I'll choose to put it in manual mode and change the gears myself. But it's electronic shifting, so you're completely in control, but instead of pressing a clutch, you're just using levers that electronically send a signal for the bike to change gears for you. So DCT is great in two situations. One, if you're negotiating city traffic, having come back from a long ride and you enter at 6 p.m. or something at rush hour, you can just put this mode on and crawl through the traffic easily without having to worry your clutch or your mind or your left foot too much. It really is very, very useful, I can tell you that. So it's been a fair amount of riding that I've done on this bike, and I've really enjoyed all the rides because this bike makes things really comfortable and easy. And it's fun to ride while also being super practical, super useful, and very safe for India because of its big wheel up front, because of its suspension. It can handle Indian conditions very well. It's also got the Honda reliability factor. It's got a great 1-liter engine that's quite torquey. So DCT is great at two things. One, it can crawl along in traffic, and it's really good at doing that. But really, the one thing it's fantastic at is it's absolutely boss when you're off-roading. Especially if you're relatively new to off-roading and you're doing some mild trails or you're doing some mild off-roading even, DCT can make you look like a hero. It can make you look like you know what you're doing on the bike, because you don't have to worry about the clutch or stalling the bike when you're going uphill or something and thereby dropping the bike. That's a very large reason that people drop the bike, because they stall it when they're going off-road. But this bike, the DCT, doesn't stall. So it can be really great if you want to do some off-roading and you don't really have a lot of time to learn all the techniques and attend all the workshops. Of course, it's a very heavy bike. It's 243 kgs, so if you drop it, it's going to be a handful to pick up. It's quite difficult to do that. Again, you have to learn techniques, but it's still quite a task. The suspension just soaks up everything, and that's really the best part about this bike. Whether you're going on the highway or you're going on bad roads, state highways, smaller village roads, you don't have to worry about a thing. Massive ground clearance, fantastic suspension, lots of wheel travel, solidly built, Honda reliability, great engine. Right, coming to the engine. It's a very torquey engine. It's got a lot of grunt at the bottom end. It feels like a big liter class bike, a really big ass bike with lots of power. And you get that feeling straight away. In fact, that's part of the reason why I got this instead of the Tiger. But it's not a high revving engine. It's not really happy being close to the red zone. It's much happier just cruising along at 4,000-5,000 RPM. And even there, because of the power, you're already at 130, 140 kilometers an hour. So you can cruise along very comfortably without stressing the engine out at all. Kind of depends on what you want. If you're looking at a sporty kind of bike, then this may not completely suffice. Although the acceleration figures are pretty tremendous because the power is amazing in the engine. It's a big engine, it's powerful. So this bike is not a slouch. It's a big engine, it's a powerful engine. And it can really show you some speed very quickly, and acceleration is quite fun. So you can enjoy yourself thoroughly, absolutely. overall, my ownership experience of this bike has been quite phenomenal. I've absolutely loved owning it. A couple of things that I had to negotiate. One was the weight of the bike, the weight and size of the bike initially. I had to learn all the techniques and grow in confidence in handling the bike, but now that's never a problem. Because of the 21-inch front wheel, this bike isn't exactly a cornering genius. There is a slight lack of feel from the front end, and you always feel like the wheel is really big up front, and it's not very inclined to turn in beautifully into very sharp corners and kind of go fast through them. But strangely, despite that wheel size and the heft of the bike, it's actually very nimble in traffic, and I think these wide handlebars have something to do with that. You don't feel the weight once the bike is moving, and it's quite well centered. Center of gravity is relatively low, so it's not that terrible to manage. It's not a top-heavy bike like some others are, like the Tiger used to be, like the Versus 650 even felt like. It felt a bit top-heavy, not this bike. It's still heavy, and you still have to know how to ride heavy bikes, but once you do, it's quite easy, relatively speaking. I think the best part about the bike really is how it can handle Indian roads and Indian conditions. A lot of adventure bikes are built to do that, but especially this Africa Twin is known to be a machine that's fantastic off-road, and I think that translates really well to Indian roads, Indian conditions, and the diverse conditions that you'll find when you're traveling from A to B in interesting places in India. All right, now I'm going to shut up and record a lot of video for voiceover.
There isn't a lot to say. All I can talk about really is the fact that the Africa Twin has a couple of contenders, and you should definitely look at those bikes. The Tiger 900 is out. The Africa Twin itself has upgraded to the Adventure Sport version this time, and there's a manual option available with tubeless wheels. That's definitely something you should look at. The GS is always in contention. So these three bikes, I would say, are the main competition to the Africa Twin.
The stance is one of the best things about this bike. It's really absolutely comfortable. You feel like you're sitting on a sofa. A lot of people say that the seat is quite hard, but I've never felt it. I've done 10, 11-hour rides, and I've been perfectly comfortable at the end of it. It's the big cat amongst the machines, amongst the adventure bikes. So therefore the big tire, big wheel, big front wheel means that it's not going to be a corner cover. But in all other respects, great engine, very powerful, very torquey, great bottom end, great for off-roading again. If you want something that's buzzing and free revving and goes like a Kawasaki Ninja, then this is not the bike. But having said that, it's not a slouch. It's really fast because the engine is powerful and there's a lot of torque. It can get up to 100 very quickly. Honda maintenance, very happy with it. I've got some great luggage panniers. I've got the Kriega mount on top of the luggage panniers, so you can put your soft luggage on it. I have the tail rack. I have an adjustable windshield, by the way, on this bike. The standard bike doesn't have an adjustable windshield, but I got one shipped to me from Germany. It has bug busters, of course. It has a crash guard that's pretty decent. Otherwise, the bike is in stock condition. I put a center stand on it. I don't know why they shipped it without a center stand. These adventure bikes need it, especially when you're oiling the chain and stuff like that and you're traveling. So you have to put a center stand. This one has a center stand on it. So this is it. After 15,000 kilometers, I really like this bike. It's done some brilliant trips. It's been really good, very entertaining, very practical. Honda. I'm really impressed by the quality and the detail and the expertise in engineering that Honda clearly has makes this bike really special. I know it feels like it was built to last for 20 years and can keep going, and that engine and all the components give you that kind of feel. Never feels cheap, feels well built, feels well engineered. So I'm a big fan of Honda now. Actually, the Japanese manufacturers are pretty good, all of them, but particularly Honda I think is number one amongst them. What else? People complain about the hard seat, but I love it actually because it's supportive. It's like mattresses, right? You can't sleep on something too soft, you'll get a backache. So I feel things are like that. The only thing about this bike, actually, I would raise the seat height a little bit more because my riding preference, I don't like to sit inside the bike, in the bike. I like to sit a little bit on top, and this gives you the feeling of being sat in the bike. Riding position ergonomics is absolutely comfortable. I've done 10, 11, 12 hours a day on this, and I've felt perfectly fine. I've slept like a baby after I've gone back to the hotel. No aches or pains. So very, very comfortable. Heat dissipation, I must mention, one of the reasons I got this bike over the Tiger. The heat dissipation, you don't feel it much at all, despite the fact that this is a big engine. I don't know how they managed it, but the air doesn't come your way. The engine, of course, gets hot. I mean, it's a big 1-liter engine. It will get hot. But you don't feel it. It doesn't come onto your legs. You don't feel it anywhere else. And in India, trust me, that is a huge issue. Huge plus for Honda. If you put some great tires on it, these tires, I've changed out. The stock tires weren't the greatest tires that I'd seen. And I put Pirelli STRs on this, which are 80/20 on-road, off-road tires. And they're very confidence inspiring. They're pretty good. I did an off-road workshop and they were pretty good there as well in very slippery conditions. They're pretty good on the road as well. They're not very noisy. So I would recommend them very strongly. There's a couple of other brands. I've got some Denali D4s as lights on the crash guards with a dimmer installed. And the reason I've done that is it's important if you're riding early in the morning to have great illumination because the stock headlamp is not enough, trust me. So you'll need these, especially if you set off really early at 4:35 a.m. In the winters, you could be riding in the dark for a couple of hours. Right, so this can carry a fair amount of luggage, even a pillion. I've carried a pillion, no problem. I feel that motorcycling is meant to be a solo activity. No pillions is great, but if you have to take a pillion, then this bike is pretty good. Very comfortable seat for the pillion and fairly easy to manage as well. Yeah, do subscribe to the channel. Do like this video. Yeah, follow Biker Babble on Facebook, and we have an Instagram account. So you should go there and follow us because we'll be putting up the Indian riding experience, and Shane and I will be chatting about different subjects that are important to bikers. Things like safety, things like riding gear, things like which bikes you should buy initially when you start riding. And I think one of our next subjects is going to be how many cylinders should a motorcycle have. So those are the kinds of things that we do in our chats. And of course, we keep reviewing bikes and we do ownership reviews. And Shane's an expert rider and his tips are fairly useful. He leads rides for various brands now. And I'm just an enthusiast that happens to like bikes. Pretty cool.